Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. My name is Sean, and I'm delighted you are joining us for today's ESBC Community Webinar. Today I'm joined by Albert Jan Schott, MVP, who will cover building Copilot Studio plugins. We love hearing what you guys had to say, so remember to join in on the conversation about today's webinar. Our handle is at ESBC_community, and our hashtag is hashtag ESBC25. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which is updated with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointeurope.com, and clicking the Content tab at the top. Don't let the learning stop here. Continue to keep up and stay ahead by joining us for our next webinar, How to Work Like a Brainiac with M365 Copilot, a no-brainer, with Caroline Kalin, MVP. This webinar will take place Monday, 7th of April, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. CEST. For more information on this webinar, please check out www.sharepointeurope.com/register for webinars. Take your Power Platform expertise to new heights at EPPC 25. Join a full-day workshop and master everything from our Power Automate to AI agents and Microsoft Copilot. You'll learn from industry professionals, build real-world future-ready skills, and connect with peers who share your passion for innovation. Use code Copilot Week to save €150. But hurry, the offer is only valid until April 30th. Scan the QR code to find out more. At Falcon Europe, you can learn about Power BI, Synapse, Data Factory, Azure SQL, Cosmos DB, Microsoft Fabric, and more. Book your super early bird sale today and save up to €700. Book now at www.sharepointeurope.com/European Microsoft Fabric Community Conference tickets. Attend Europe's premier Microsoft 365 and AI conference for incredible insights and real-world inspiration. Book today and take advantage of our super early bird sale. Use code Copilot Week to save €150 on your ticket. This offer is valid until April 30th. Scan the QR code to find out more and secure your place. After this webinar, we'll have a questions and answer session. Type any questions you might have into the questions box. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass it over to today's webinar presenter, Albert. Hello, Albert. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, good morning, evening, whatever it is in your time zone. Let me share my screen, and if all is good, you should be able to see my screen now. There we go.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Thanks for the introduction. Let's start with everyone calls me Appy. So next time, please introduce me as Appy, because well, everyone knows me like that. I've brought a few slides, not too many, because I definitely believe that we should focus on demos. That's what we are here for. But it all starts with at least a few slides. Now, I'm assuming that most of the people attending the webinar have seen a slide like this. Microsoft has been saying we're a Copilot company, and we believe in a future where there will be a Copilot for everyone and everything you do. And I think when Satya Nadella said this, it was still called Copilot. Nowadays, we all of a sudden call it agents, but you get the gist. Microsoft is betting really, really hard on what you can achieve by building your own agents and by leveraging how the Copilot scene is working for you. And if you attended Ignite last year, or if you watched recordings of the Ignite last year, you might have seen a slide like this, or you might have seen this slide where Microsoft says, hey, Copilot is the UI for AI. And Copilot as an interface allows you to leverage existing agents, or with Copilot Studio, you can build your own agents, and those agents can reason over your data, they can reason over your APIs, they can expose APIs or data, and they will help you in interacting with a different way of your experience. And it's different because when you start experimenting with AI, you might experience that AI is more about probability. It's less about explicitly stating if something happens, you'll need to do that. It's more of a, let's say, probability thing. And you'll see that when you will be building your first agent, that it's a new experience and it's slightly different than you might have experienced before. Now, luckily for us, some of the controls that Microsoft has built around data access and around governance are available for Copilot Studio as well. So if you are aware what you can do with the Power Platform, you'll pick up Copilot Studio experience pretty quick. Those experiences are called the Copilot control system, and you will see some of those in the demos. But just so you understand, what we will be focusing on today is the Copilot Studio experience. Now, one of the things that you'll probably encounter during this Copilot week is that there will be talks about lots of different Copilots, and it's good to understand a little bit about the experiences or the terminology around Copilot. And if you say Copilot, then there are multiple Copilots. There are free Copilots that you can use, like the Microsoft 365 Copilot chat. There is GitHub Copilot that has a freemium model, and you might see the M365 Copilot chat available in Teams. So you can get started for free with the Copilot experience. The second thing is that there are enhanced experience. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, a paid licensing model. There's the security Copilot. There is Copilot in Azure for Dynamics. You have Copilot available in Power Automate, Power Apps, and Power BI. Those are paid experiences, are paid models that you'll have to buy a license for, but they will give you different functionality. So the M365 Copilot chat you get for free. It gives you the Copilot experience. It allows you to experience generative AI, but M365 Copilot can actually reason over your data. So it can reason over your email, can reason over your documents. So it's a slightly different experience. But you can also build your own. And build your own means that with Copilot Studio or the Azure AI Foundry, you can build your own logic, your own agent logic, and you have full control over the way that it works. Even better, you have full control over models that are being used. So with the M365 Copilot chat or M365 Copilot, you do not have control. It's a service Microsoft offers you, and you're stuck with what they decide is the best model for that job. But maybe you say, I have different functionality requirements. Maybe you want to use a different model. Maybe you want to use Mistral or you want to use Llama. And you see, and you can use those models whether you're in Azure AI Foundry or whether you are in Copilot Studio. So that's one of the good things. You have some more flexibility, some more freedom that you can apply. Now, if you look at the M365 experience, if you look at the Azure experience, there's different resources that you can use to build. So if you're looking at building experience, building agents, then you can use the Azure experiences and you can use on the different Azure experiences that there are. You can use the Power Platform experiences as a low-code developer. But what we'll be focusing on today is we'll be focusing on the Copilot Studio experience, so how Copilot Studio will work. We will have a look at the Power Platform developer tools, because as a developer, you probably want to extend more than just what Copilot would offer you. So you have a bit of a mix. And when we talk about that, then you can say that the experience, Copilot Studio, that's the low-code experience, and the Power Platform developer tools are more focused on what you will see as a full code developer. So if you want to do more, if you want to extend what options you have in Copilot Studio, you'll probably use those Copilot developer tools. Luckily, those Copilot developer tools are available for both Visual Studio and VS Code. In the demo, we're going to use Visual Studio because, well, I built my demo with that, but generally speaking, you can achieve the same with the VS Code plugins and experiences. Now, a few remarks when we build agents and when we talk about agents, then you can conceptually speak that agents can live in different front ends. So typically the demos that you see nowadays are either in product, so in Word, PowerPoint, you have the Copilot experience, or in Teams as a chatbot. But you can also have autonomous agents that act in the background to execute tasks, or you can get personalized recommendations on your phone or in a web shopping experience. So when we are thinking about building our first AI agent, it's not just only building that chat experience. typically the chat experience is the easiest way to get started, the easiest way to build something, but it's not necessarily the only way. So that into account when you're building stuff. Then those agents that you will be building, beside the logic that you can build, they can either reason or pull data, additional data, they can search for data, or they can integrate with backend systems. And that's what we'll show you today, how you can either connect to existing data so that the data can be used to give answers over, or integrate with backend systems and retrieve data from APIs or other systems. And this was a slide that I really, really liked about the Ignite, and that is the spectrum of AI agents. If you're building AI agents and you have your first, let's say, proof of concept or your first demo, then you'll typically start with the retrieval agent. And why would you do that? Well, because building a retrieval agent is fairly straightforward. What you can do with a retrieval agent is you can retrieve data or information, and you can use that data to ground upon or reason over, summarize the data so that users can ask questions and the information is being pulled from data. Setting it up is fairly straightforward, and the advantage is that it will help you understand how generative AI work and how you can apply generative AI in your agent experience. Second thing you can do is you can also take action when the user does something. And that's what we're going to focus on today as well. We're going to show how you can connect, how you can configure APIs to be usable in your generative AI solution, in your agent. So that means that your agent now all of a sudden can interact with other systems. And finally, you can build autonomous agents, and that's agents that pick up on something, some event, and start doing things, or be influenced by other agents as well. So if you would make this a simple, retrieval data could look at your HR data. Let's say how many vacation days I do have left. Then I can look at my HR data and it will tell me like, okay, you typically have 25 days off in a year because I live in the Netherlands. It's like typical 25 or 26 days. So that would be retrieval information. That's general information available in my company, and I can look at our HR data and we'll say, okay, generally speaking, you have 26 days off. Then maybe I can say, okay, but I want to reach out to our HR system and actually look how many actual vacation days I have up. So how many PTO can I take? And I can say, okay, it needs to look at my HR system. It needs to look up Albert Jan. It will then need to say, okay, how many days did you already take up? So maybe I did like 3 or 4 this year. And also like, okay, you've got 26, but you already took 3. So you get 23 left. And that's more of a task-based agent. And then finally, autonomous agents can go as far as say, hey, I recognize that a new colleague is joining a company. I'll reach out and I will tell them like, hey, I'm your HR buddy. You can ask me any questions. I can do this and this and this and this for you. So it can actually do things for me. And you might have seen demos about the autonomous agents where it actually books hotels for you. But you can imagine that doing those types of tasks, those autonomous tasks, are more advanced scenarios. And I wouldn't recommend starting there. I would definitely start playing around with retrieval. And as soon as you understand a little bit of how that works, look at what you can achieve with those task-based agents, and then moving on to more of the autonomous experience. So you have those options. It's a growing model. You grow into the different scenarios. Now, before we go into the demo, let's have one more architectural slide because that makes some sense. Let's look at the way an agent works. So an agent architecture, you might have seen this before, but what happens is there's always going to be a foundational model, and that foundational model is a generative AI model, and that generative AI model will be used by your agent to interact with. So this makes sure that it can use natural language to interact with you. And on top of that foundational model, there is something called the orchestrator, and the orchestrator is the type of technology or the framework that will decide what needs to happen. And it can do a few things. First of all, it can pick up knowledge and it can use that knowledge for instruction and grounding. So this is where I would configure what kind of knowledge it can look to, like what kind of data can it search through, and I can give it instructions, give it a tone of voice, give it a sort of a personality. How should it interact with your users? Then I can say I want to add actions and capabilities, triggers and workflows. So sort of the skills, what can it do? So the orchestrator will first look at the instructions and it will then look at the skills. What actions can I execute for a user? And then finally, when we do autonomous agents, you can do planning and exceptions and self-learning. And you can teach back like what needs to happen in certain scenarios. So this is typically how an agent's architecture would look like. And then on top of that, you decide what the user experience is. And the user experience, it says optional. That doesn't mean that you don't never need to think about user experience. But if you do autonomous agents, it could be that another agent will be providing the user interface or the user experience for the user, and that agent will then talk to multiple other agents, meaning that you're not specifically focusing on a specific user interface. So you can have multiple different agents that you can use. So let's have a start with Copilot Studio, because that's why we're here, right? Copilot Studio. And when you go to Copilot Studio, you get sort of this interface. It might change every now and then, but Copilot Studio allows you to create those agents. And if you create an agent, you also have the option to extend specific agents. And this was one of the let's say ads that Microsoft ran in the Copilot Studio experience. It says, hey, your Copilot is ready. This is what you can do. And there are three things that make up a agent and make it smart. First of all, you can add knowledge, the data, so that you can provide responses based on the data, the topics, and then the actions. And let's have a quick look on how that will look. So let's do a demo first. The first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to go to the Copilot control system, because when we're going to do things with Copilot, we want to make sure that it is actually working. So the first thing I can do is I can go to the admin experience. So I'm in the admin portal, I'm on my demo environment, and what I can do is I can go to my settings, I can go to my let me see, I can set it to my integrated apps. And the first thing here is I can go to shared agents, and I can always see that all the agents that I've been building over the time, and if I share them, I can always see those agents being shared. And I can always block them if I'm no longer happy with them, but at least there is a overview, a experience that you can use to see what agents have been built in your demo environment or in your production environment. Second thing I can do is I can go to Copilot and go to the Copilot control system. And within the Copilot control system, there is a settings tab and there is an extensions tab. So that Copilot settings tab, that gives you the extension overview. And that extension overview, if I select it, this allows you, as you can see, manage which users can actually install custom apps and extensions from either Microsoft or other providers. And that means that I can control who can use customly built agents. So that's actually a good thing. Now, on my demo environment, I went for all users. Typically, in a production scenario, you might not want everyone to be able to install agents. You might want to have more governance, more control, making sure that not everyone can install those new agents. So you want to have some control over them. This is let's say the admin experience. This is what you at least need to do. You need to make sure that in a development or a demo environment, everyone can do that. Otherwise, you won't be able to share those agents. Now with that, let's have a look at building our first agent. And building our first agent, we can go to Copilot Studio. If I go to the home of Copilot Studio, you'll see here, I can describe my agent to create it, or I can manually create everything for me. It's, from a technical perspective, both have the exact same experience. The result is exactly the same. So what will happen is if I describe it, I will be guided through the process of how to do everything. And if I go to my agents and I click on new agent, what happens is I will need to configure or like slightly different experience. You see here, they change it regularly. So now I can say, okay, what do we want to make? I still get the AI experience, or I can click on skip to configure and do everything new. Now let's go with a webinar agent so I can be guided through what I'll need to do. And it will tell me, okay, I'm looking like what do you do to do, and you see here on the right all the steps that are being taken for me. So it will say, okay, this is an agent to design or to assist with scheduling, organizing, and managing webinar, providing web. Sure. So what are we doing? Webinar assistant sounds great, or I could change the name if I don't like it. And it will guide me through all the different steps that there are. So it will say, okay, let's define what the agent should do. Should it say like the agent should help users schedule, manage, and conduct webinars? Well, not completely. I'm going to say the agent schedule, manage, and conduct a specific webinar called Copilot Week. Now, I will change that slightly, but now it understands a little bit better what we're talking about. So this makes it a little bit easier. So the agent should provide reminders and updates about a webinar, assisted with technical issues, offer resources related to Copilot. So yeah, that sounds good. So let's keep that. And I'm almost done. It's almost figured out everything it needs to figure out. What I now can do is I can, sure, would you like to add any publicly accessible data? So I can add data. I can add websites or SharePoint knowledge, and I can, well, basically decide different options. So what I can do is I can say, well, sure, let's add the Copilot Week URL. So I'll add it there, and it will try to see if it can get that data, get that information for me, and it will take a second to load. But well, okay, I can't add SharePoint sites. You can configure SharePoint, sure. Okay, that makes sense. Now you can continue, and I can either tweak it here so I can keep iterating on the text, or I can say, well, let's create. And as soon as you click on create, it will create, it will set up the agent, it will add all the different details, all the information, and it will be within a minute or so will be available for me, and then I can actually start using it. So in here, you will see that I now have my webinar assistant. I can see the actions, topics, and publish. I can see the description, the general instructions. I can see, okay, hey, it didn't add my knowledge, so something went wrong. Oh, let's see. Your organization data loss prevention policies do not allow you to create any triggers. Okay, well, interesting. I have a DLP policy issue, so we can look at that in a second. I have some starter prompts. So all in all, I've created some of the details that are in here. Now, what I can do is I can add that knowledge. I can say I'm going to do a public website. I'm going to add it. And I can say, okay, the knowledge source searches everything about Copilot. So I'll add that. And you will see, there it is. Let's see, not allowed due to my data loss preventions. So this is an important thing. As you can see, I configured something on my environment with data loss preventions. And even though everything technically works, the DLP policies prevent me of adding this knowledge. So that's actually a good thing. And we're going to turn off the DLP policy in a second. But as you can see, everything gets created, everything is there, but well, I can't use this specific knowledge because there is a DLP policy. Now, this is the create stuff. This is where we start. Now, the next thing that you're going to do, the next thing is that you're going to add different types of knowledge. We can do different scenarios. And let's have a look at the first thing. What happens is if a user asks a question that's from a technical perspective called an utterance. And the utterance is the first part that will happen. So what you see here, the utterance is coming in, the user says something, and the Copilot orchestrator will look whether it can recognize an intent. And if it does, it matches that intent to a specific topic. And if it's matching a topic, it can execute a standard dialogue and like respond with text, or it can execute an action. And if it can execute an action, it will run a flow, a prompt. We can do Azure AI skills, we can do search queries, we can call a REST API, or we can call our custom connector. If it doesn't recognize the intent, it will go to the generative AI topic. It is sort of like a fallback scenario. And the fallback scenario can be configured to look at all the knowledge sources and reason over that knowledge source. If it doesn't find anything, you get another fallback. And again, you could configure generative AI. And if you don't have anything, what will happen? It will go to the fallback scenario and it will then say something like, sorry, I couldn't find an answer for you. So what from a technical perspective happens is it will always first try to match on a specific topic. And if it doesn't match a specific topic, it will try to use generative AI to do something for you. So this is important if you're designing stuff or if you're designing a conversation flow, the way that your agent is replying to information. Now, with that, well, let's do the first thing. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a prompt. I want to add a specific configurable prompt, and that prompt should be able to use a large language model and do something with user input. And if you look at Copilot, if you look at the low-code experience, what happens is if I configure a prompt, if I go to Copilot Studio, we'll do that in a second, but I will add a new prompt. What happens is in the Dataverse table, there is an entity AI plugin operation, and it will create a new value in there. And that value contains the configuration that is required to execute this specific operation. So it will refer to the specific prompt, it will look at the inputs, potentially the outputs. And what you can see here is what then happens is user asks a question to Copilot. Copilot recognizes the topic and recognizes that there is an action for it. It will then trigger that specific action and it will call my specific prompt template. So if I create a prompt template, I can call it and it will get executed. Now, if you're writing a prompt template, there are some samples out there. What I can do is something like review a user story. And if you've been playing around with AI, you might have seen something like this before, a prompt template where you say, first you define the task, then you define the context, then you define expectations and output. So if you do a typical GPT 4.0 mini prompt, it might look something like this. Now, potentially, you want to use a different model. So if you do the research prompt template, you have a slightly different format and you describe it more in a question response and an output table. So you will see that different models have different best practices for writing an appropriate prompt. There is a ton of information out there on the internet that you can go through and let's say look at samples that are out there and use them. There is the prompt library, the PMP prompt samples library, where you see a lot of sample prompts that you can use. And basically, it's experimenting. You'll need to experiment with the different prompt templates to see what works for you, to see what doesn't work for you, and where you think you can add the most value. So let me switch back to demo and let's have a look at how we can create such a prompt template. I can switch to this one. I can say, well, let's go to my actions. Let's say I'm going to add an action. And here you see all the different actions that I can add. I can say, well, I'm going to do a new action. I'm going to choose a new prompt. And as you can see, there are several options out of the box available. Summarize, extract information. I can classify something. I can go to my prompt library and see more specific samples that are out there. And well, I could say something like, hey, can you create a blog post? Or can you create some hashtags for this? Can you act as an IT expert? And well, I'm going to go with my webinar assistant, and maybe I'm an IT assistant for the given webinar. So I'm going to say, okay, act as an IT expert. Sure, let's scroll all the way, and you will see that finally there is an input problem. So what I can do is I can say input problem, and maybe the sample data is I can sign in to the webinar. I can potentially add knowledge, so I can add additional data that it can look, maybe a frequently asked question list based on a product that you might be using. I can say, okay, the output, it might be text or JSON. I can even say I want to play around with different models. You can see out of the box I have GPT and standard. I can play with the temperature, the record retrieval. I can say whether links are allowed or not. But let's go with this. And as you can see, what happens is it takes a second to provision everything. So the prompt will be created, the AI operation will be registered in Dataverse, and after about, I don't know, like 20 seconds, you will see that there is a new phase and a new overview. And what you see here is you see that it now says, okay, custom prompt. So I can play around with the prompt, and I can say IT expert, and this is where it gets really, really important. The description is the most important part of the thing you will create. Why? Because the description is used by the orchestrator to decide when do we need to do anything with this. So what we can say, this prompt acts as an IT expert to solve any and all technical problems the user might have when connecting to a webinar. This way, if I describe it like this, the orchestrator can better understand when do we need to trigger this prompt, when do we need to do anything with this. And you can see I can also see what inputs there is. There is some output. I can say, well, let's add this action. It might take a few seconds. And with that, 1, 2, 3. There we go. So I have a IT expert, and you can see that the trigger is a AI plugin action. So the action has been created, and I can say something like, I can sign into the webinar. And let's see what happens. Whoops, I can't do anything. So as you can see, data loss prevention need to be removed. And what I will do is I will switch to my productivity buddy because I already configured that. And I'll quickly see, I have some topics here as well. I have some actions. I'll quickly do a action, new prompt. I'll do the prompt library. There we go. I'm going to save it again. That's always the risk of doing live demos. And I will create it again. While that loads, I can say this is IT expert, and we can say act as an IT expert to solve any tech problems users might have. Let's see. And I will create again. So there we go, IT expert. I have problems signing into the webinar, and it will run and it will try, and then whoops, it gave an error. Now, why would it give an error? Well, if I go to the IT expert, what you will see is that there are no required inputs. So what I'll need to do is I need to make sure that the input is actually there, because the prompt cannot run without an input. So it will throw an error if you're not specifying that input. So both the description, like this part, and the inputs are really, really important. And we're not going to waste too much time on adding that input, but you get the gist. Inputs and description are really important. And you will see the same if we do a, whoops, let me go through this. If we go to Power Automate. So what we can do is we can go to Power Automate and create or run a specific flow. And you will see that it is exactly the same. The only difference is now, rather than running that specific prompt, it will now trigger the flow, and it will run the flow and will do something for you. So let's go to that specific demo. There we go, demo. I will switch to this one. I can go to my actions. You see that I already added one, but I will redo it just so that you can see how that works. I can go to add action. I can go and select find meeting time because I already created that. I can also say I want to create a new Power Automate flow. But what I did is I went to my Power Automate flow. I created a Power Automate flow called find meeting time. And all that this does is it will try to ask for users. It will use the find meeting time with that specific user, and it will respond to Copilot with the response. Now we will see that this will not be a complete working scenario, but if you go to the different flows, if I go to the Power Automate, you will see a sample. There is a template that you can use that does find meeting time as well. You can look for inspiration there, but just to see what this would do, this is the flow. I can select it. You will see that this one does have a input. So we said there is a required input. And what we said is that dynamically fill with the best option. The user display name for the prompt is users. But what are we trying to put in there? We're trying to put in the user email address in there. And I can say Copilot prompts the user for the input. We said, okay, you can retry this twice. You can also say, I want to never repeat it or repeat it only once. You have some options over there. We can do entity validation. So we could add logic to make sure that whatever is coming in is actually an email address, because if we put in something that's not an email address, it wouldn't work. And you see there are no additional inputs, so we didn't do anything with that. Typically, if I go to the edit mode, you will see that I also have the option to add the meeting length. So I could put in the amount of minutes a meeting should take. But let's have a look what happens if I say, can you plan a meeting with this email address? Because I'm pretty sure that this email address is existence. Ooh, this is interesting. This one is also failing. Let's try again. Try again. Can something has happened. Well, technology, always good. 1, 2, 3. Ooh, can you plan? No, I think I'm having some problems with Copilot Studio. That's too bad. Well, let's have a quick look at the run I did yesterday because, well, technology. Let me go to the view history. You can see that at least yesterday I had one success. I can actually go there. You can see that the skill is coming in, that I've asked for a specific email address. I can then say something like, well, I found something, but whoops, attendees unavailable. So apparently this email address is never available, but I still can respond to Copilot and say something like, I'm done, or I can say, well, she's not available, no meeting for you. So you can play around with those different options. And that way you can use Power Automate to add a piece of business logic to your solution. Now, finally, the last option, that is definitely, I think, the most interesting one, and that is the custom connectors. Like if you want to do custom connectors, you have all the different options in there as well. So that is get data from backend systems using natural language. And you will see that it looks a little bit like running a Power Automate flow. The difference is the Power Automate flow is the low code experience, and you can also use the full code experience. And what you can do with full code is you can do the following. Let me switch to my to-do API. I have a Visual Studio API running, and what I can do, because I am in Visual Studio, I can say, first thing I need to do is I can add a dev tunnel, and apparently I'll need to sign in again. Let's see if that happens. Let me do sign in. Let me see, sign in. There we go. Ooh, multiple tenants, always fun. Signing in again. And there we go. Demo tunnel, tunnel type persistent. Okay, I can do the public tunnel for now because that makes my demo a little bit easier. There we go. I'm expecting the tunnel to be present any minute now. What I can then do is I can say dev tunnel, yes, there we go. So what I can then do is I can use this API. So I have an API, it's running locally, and what I now can do is I can configure that API and deploy it as a custom connector without doing any work at all other than pressing a publish button. So there we go. It's still loading, loading, loading. But as soon as it is, there we go. So I have a custom connector called my event to-dos. I can keep to-do items in this one, and I can select my public dev tunnel as soon as it is loading. The downside of doing live demos, I don't know why it is taking so long. There we go. So my demo tunnel is available. What I can do is I can click next. And I can say, okay, publish this custom connector. And starting the project build, it will deploy this API that is currently only running locally. And through that dev tunnel, makes this API available so that my custom actions can actually use this specific API running locally on my machine. So the custom action can be triggered. And the cool thing is you can add that custom action then to your Copilot. Now we're going to wait a few more seconds so that it is actually visible. Loading, loading, loading. There we go, detected. Updating custom connector. This may take a few minutes. Normally it's pretty quick, but hey, you never know. And while this is running, what I will do is I will switch back. I will go to my actions and I can prepare it. I added to-do items. I added retrieve to-do items. And what I can do is I can edit those two and I can have a look on what actually happens. And here you see that I have a action name, a display name. I have a description, and again, the description is the most important part. And what I can do is I can define how the authentication should work. So when you do custom actions, what you can do is you can decide whether the action is using your, as a Copilot author, credentials to authenticate through this API, or it can use the user's authentication. And if you do user authentication, what needs to happen is the user needs to have that connection available. So the first time it will try to trigger it, it will tell the user, hey, please sign in, do something. And again, you can add a description of the connector action that you might want to use. So the description for the agent to know when to use this action is the most important part, because that is what's being used by the orchestrator to decide when this needs to be triggered. So here it says this action retrieve adds a new task and to do or chore to the to-do list. So here you see this is adding, and I can go to inputs and then I can say, okay, what do I need when I need to add a new to-do item? Well, I always need a name. So what we're doing, we're gonna add the specific name of the to-do item to create. Again, here you also have the additional settings. It should always prompt the user for this question. If it can't find it, please repeat up to 2 times. Maybe you want to change it to repeat this to only do once. I can configure the retry prompt so I can play around with the text that's being used, and I can add validation if you want. So you will see that this is exactly the same as the input for a Power Automate flow, the input for a prompt would work, but now in this specific case, we're doing it for an API. I can also say I have some output, and the output is slightly different. Why? Well, if we call this API, let's have a look at this is finished. Yes, I can run this. So we'll have a look at how the API would look. 1, 2, 3.
Albert, just there's a question in there about the
Sure.
demos. Is all of this functionality in demos standard available in Microsoft 365 Copilot, or do we need a separate license?
So if you want to use this, you'll need a Copilot Studio license to create these types of agents. But if you have that, then you're good. I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. Thanks, Albert.
So let me quickly run the local host. So here you see that if I do a get, I always get back a ID, a name, and whether it is complete. So you will see that if I go to this one, here you see I also have an ID, complete, and a name. So we'll give you some detail. And again, here you can add a display name and a description, and that will help the Copilot orchestrator to better understand how it would look, whether I'm adding a Copilot item or getting them. So let me switch to the getting. You will see that the overview get to do items is exactly the same. I still need to do a sign in. The input, well, there are no inputs when I want to retrieve items. There are outputs, and you can tweak that output like, hey, is it an array? Is it a response? Do you want to change something about it? Do you want to store everything specific? Like, what do you um, do with the result? And here you see that what I can do is I can create a message. I can render this. I can also say, hey, I'm going to do an adaptive card. So I want to play around with how this would look. And rather than just picking the default option, I would definitely recommend playing around with these different options. So with that, let me switch to the final slides, and it definitely starts with experimenting, right? Experience only comes from playing around with this tool, experience firsthand what works for you and what doesn't work. And I would give you three remarks that I can definitely recommend. First of all, if you start playing with the Copilot orchestrator, you will experience that it is different than integrating with any other system. Like working with APIs, it's always true or false. There's always specific choices you'll need to make. But as soon as you do generative AI, it's different. So you'll need the experience of playing around with it and finding time to see how things work. Second, Copilot will always rewrite your answer. So if you use the orchestrator to translate things that you retrieve from an API, it might rewrite it. And a simple example of this is that if I call the API for my to-do items and there are no to-do items, what an API does, it will return you an empty array and it will say 200 success. So the orchestrator will say, I have successfully retrieved your to-do items, and there won't be any results. Why? Well, the orchestrator thinks I get a 200, that's a success. An empty array is also a success. So if you don't tell that orchestrator, hey, if the result is empty, please let the user know that there are no to-dos, it will not do that. That are typical things you'll need to experience firsthand to see what works or what doesn't work. And the third one, the description is critical. Without that proper description, things will not work. Now you can use generative AI, whether you use Copilot or ChatGPT, to come up with a good description. You can just tell it like, hey, I'm working with an orchestrator. It's using large language. I'll need to come up with a description that will help to decide when to execute this action. This is what it will need to do. And it will help you finding the proper description for you. Now, if you want to get started, these are the most important links. So all the links are Microsoft links. There's Flow plugins, conversational plugins, prompt plugin, connector plugins, and the Power Platform sample prompts that are out there. Definitely worth it. And with that, a few minutes for questions.
Perfect. And thank you, Albert, for a great presentation demos. So we'll now get into the questions and answers part. Should you wish to ask a question, please feel free to type in the questions box now. So our next question is, are there any stats available on the number of agents that have stopped working since DLP enforcement recently began?
No, I'm not aware of any publicly available stats around that. I can say that roughly half of the stuff that we've been building has had some issues.
Perfect.
But
so the next question.
I think it's a good thing that those DLP policies are being enforced. It makes our lives safer. It's a bit of a pain currently to fix all the agents, but then again, it's a safer solution, so it does make sense for me.
Perfect. So the next question there is, hello and thanks very much for the informative session. From what is being shown in the demos, could you explain which functions, agents, extensions, etc. are available in the Microsoft 365 E5 license without buying the Microsoft 365 Copilot license?
Yes, if you have a M365 E5, you have access to the M365 Copilot chat experience, so the freemium model. And currently, if you let me quickly pick up, so this one, the left one, the M365 Copilot chat, that's the only one that is free that you can use. If you want to extend that, you do have only access to declarative agents currently, and declarative agents is a limited subset of what we've shown here. If you want to play around with the extensibility options, you'll need the M365 Copilot. If you don't want to buy additional user licenses, you can also buy a consumption license for M365 Copilot. So it's not linked to users, but you still need to pay for the consumption.
Perfect. So the next question there is, hi, and in order to create custom connectors, do we need PAYG or message pack along with Microsoft 365 Copilot license?
I'm not 100% sure. Would love to park this one and follow up if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. So the next question, I don't know if you already answered this, is do the users that are using the agents must have a Copilot license?
That depends a little bit on where you deploy to. If you deploy to Microsoft Teams, you do not need additional licenses. If you want to deploy to other locations, you might need additional licensing.
Perfect. So I think that's all the questions for this webinar. So on behalf of the ESPC community, we'd like to extend a big thank you again, Albert, for taking time out to carry out this webinar. We really appreciate it.
It was great doing. I had fun, so that's always good. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. I'm active on social, and otherwise, I'm pretty sure Sean can make contact happen.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks.
There's one question that came in there. Is there any link on how I deploy in Teams?
No, I don't have a link on that, but I can really quickly show you. So if I go to my productivity buddy, so if I go to an agent, you can always go to channels, and here you see, because you choose Microsoft Authentication, only Teams and M365 channel is available. I can click on publish, and then it will go through and automatically do that. If you haven't chosen Teams M365, I can always click on this one, and you can say here and then say add channel, and it will be available. So all you have to do is create an agent, go to channels, and select Teams and M365. And you see here that there is the little checkbox saying, hey, make agent available in M365 Copilot chat.
Perfect. So that's the end of today's webinar. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointeurope.com/resource center. Thanks again for all of you to join us today, and I hope you join us again soon. Take care.
Thanks.